Good evening, viewers. You're watching To The Point. I'm Preeti Chaudhary. It's the race to the Rajya Sabha. The Rajya Sabha elections are in 10 days. Today was the last date for filing nomination. Both the BJP and the Congress declared their candidate list. The Congress, with its 10 names, caused a fair bit of resentment within its own ranks, with many saying that it is a loyalist of those picked who are close to the Gandhis. The BJP on its own released 22 names, I beg your pardon, and of the 22 names, viewers, not one Muslim face, which will tantamount to that in the days to come, be it the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha, the BJP will not have a Muslim face in either houses. It's the race to the Rajya Sabha. Last date to file nominations, 31st May, Tuesday. The Congress has announced its list of 10 candidates. The BJP has announced its list of 22. For the Congress, it's a list of resentment within the party and severe criticism of the names that made the cut, and most of it coming from within the ranks.
ये राज्यसभा पार्किंग स्लॉट बन गई है और जिसकी ऊपर ठीक होती है उसको राज्यसभा मिल जाती है, तो इसलिए इस चीज पे भी बहुत गंभीरता से विचार करना चाहिए कि क्या इस देश को राज्यसभा की जरूरत है भी कि नहीं.
The Congress has fielded Rajiv Shukla and Ranjit Ranjan from Chhattisgarh, Ajay Makan from Haryana, Jairam Ramesh from Karnataka, Vivek Tankha from Madhya Pradesh, Imran Pratap Gadi from Maharashtra, Randeep Singh Surjewala, Mukul Wasnik and Pramod Tiwari from Rajasthan, P. Chidambaram from Tamil Nadu. The party slammed by its own for its outsider Rajasthan candidates, none of whom hail from the state.
प्रत्याशी तय करना पार्टी का अधिकार है, लेकिन राजस्थान के किसी भी कांग्रेस नेता और कार्यकर्ता को प्रत्याशी नहीं बनाने से राजस्थान के लोगों में गहरी निराशा है.
The party denied tickets to veterans like Ghulam Nabi Azad, Kumari Selja and Anand Sharma. However, other expectants who lost out, like Pawan Khera, known for his feisty defense of the party line in TV debates, expressed his disappointment with a Hindi tweet after the Congress released its list of 10. Maybe there is something missing in my penance, he tweeted.
To get carried away by personal ambition or to get carried away by emotion is a luxury we can't afford. यह लड़ाई लंबी है, हमारी विचारधारा की लड़ाई है. अपनी विचारधारा को मजबूती दें और उस जहरीली विचारधारा को हराएं. यह संभव है.
Former actor Nagma too tweeted out that her 18-year-old penance meant nothing. Both Nagma and Pawan Khera later reconciled by tweeting congratulations to those picked. While the Chintan Shivir of the Congress party in Udaipur promised sweeping structural changes, the coterie over caliber list of Rajya Sabha nominees underlines what is now said too often: the more things change in the Congress, the more they remain the same. While the BJP has released its list of 22 names as candidates, none of them are Muslims. The criticism comes for the party: no minority representation. The 3 BJP Muslim MPs in Rajya Sabha, Mukhtar Abbas Naqvi, Said Zafar Islam and MJ Akbar, are completing their tenure soon but haven't been renominated. This means that the BJP will soon have 0 MPs in either Rajya Sabha or Lok Sabha in the parliament. The BJP's no Muslim representation is glaring. However, the party seems to have done better in terms of tribal OBC representation of those who have their ear to the ground. Not so much like the Congress, where the list reads out as a list of darbaris. The election to Rajya Sabha take place on the 10th of June. Bureau Report, India Today. All right, viewers, 2 lists out. What does it mean for the Congress party and the Bharatiya Janata Party as well? Like many accusing the Congress of possibly picking coterie over caliber, and where the BJP is concerned, not one minority or a Muslim face. That would mean both houses, Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, will not have a single Muslim face where the BJP is concerned. I want to cut across to our panelists this evening. Rasheed Kidwai, senior journalist, joins us. So does Rajdeep Sardesai, our consulting editor. He's in the studio with me. Rahul Shrivastava, national affairs editor, is also with us. Rajdeep, if you have to compare between the Congress and the BJP in the choices that they have made for their candidates for the Rajya Sabha, what would you say?
In simple words, one party has worked as a political party. The other party has worked as a loyalist party. That's the big difference. One party has been very, very political in its choices, used social engineering where possible, strong Dalit OBC representation in the BJP's list. If you look at the Congress's list by contrast, it's run more like a private doling out of benefits to those who are seen as quote-unquote firm Gandhi family loyalists. And even within the family, I see a triumvirate emerging. Some seen close to Priyanka Gandhi Vadra, like Imran Pratapgarhi or indeed Pramod Tiwari. Some seen as close to Rahul Gandhi, like a Randeep Surjewala or an Ajay Maken. And some seen as part of the old guard that Sonia Gandhi would like to keep still with her, the likes of P. Chidambaram and Jairam Ramesh. So you've got, in a way, a division within the family, but most of the choices could be said to be decided by the family. On the other hand, the BJP has looked for leaders this time, particularly in states like Uttar Pradesh, where they recognize that the OBC Dalit factor has played an important role in its rise. It's not as if, all BJP leaders are homegrown, rooted leaders. So Nirmala Sitharaman, finance minister, will get a ticket from Karnataka. But by and large, the BJP's list seems to be much more politically sharper. Yes, one advantage the BJP has is that the BJP has a lot of supply, lots of seats, and therefore it can pick and choose. The Congress, on the other hand, had limited supply of seats and therefore had to choose.
But Rajdeep, before I go to Rahul Shrivastava, I want to ask you, politically smarter, yes, but politically correct, because there's not a single minority face. That would mean both Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha for the BJP will not have a Muslim face.
That's a bit surprising, and there will be certainly a question mark over that. We'll have to see how the BJP accommodates the likes of Mukhtar Abbas Naqvi, if at all. Interestingly, the BJP is also, we are now told, going to be backing an independent candidate, Subhash Chandra Goel of Z in Rajasthan. Questions will be raised in that context. Why are you choosing to back an outsider when you attack the Congress for importing outside? Look, the Congress's problem, and this is my final point, Chhattisgarh, two seats, both outsiders, Rajiv Shukla and Ranjita Ranjan in Chhattisgarh. 3 seats in Rajasthan, going to the polls next year like Chhattisgarh, all 3 outsiders. When outsiders or so-called outsiders are preferred, not that the Rajya Sabha has any bar against outsiders, but what's the message you are sending to your cadres just before a major election? That's why I said, I don't think that the Congress has looked at this list politically as they promised to do during the Udaipur Chintan Shivir. The BJP is looking at every election from a political lens.
Stay with us, Rajdeep. I want to bring in our other 2 panelists as well, Rahul Shrivastava as well as Mr. Kidwai is with us. Rahul Shrivastava, you followed the elections to the Rajya Sabha, and I still remember you were on my show, especially when the Ahmed Patel elections were going on, and it was down to the wire for days on end. But coming back to the lists that have been picked up by both political parties, how do they merit if you compare the choice possibly the Congress has made for the 10 and the 22 by the BJP?
CPT, I will dare to slightly disagree with Mahapandit of politics, Rajdeep Sardesai. Actually, there is a similarity between what the BJP and the Congress have done. Both are consolidating, but consolidating for whom? The BJP is consolidating for the party for the future. The Congress is consolidating for the family. The problem for the Congress is that where does the Congress go from here on? It is right from the Chintan Shivir, you see, the entire exercise has been to keep the flock together, whosoever is with them, and perhaps to emphasize the supremacy of the first family. And that is why this entire exercise of taking Dilliwala to Haryana and Delhiwalas to Chhattisgarh, this entire exercise is basically to cover over the kind of fissures which exist in the Congress party. So it does not help the Congress politically in future. It helps perhaps the first family. And while the BJP with its social engineering, see, when you bring in the element of Muslim, there will be no Muslim MP in the two houses. Well, that's an accepted fact when BJP didn't field Muslim candidates in UP. The fact is that the BJP has come to terms with the fact that Muslims are not going to vote for it. Having a Muslim in the Council of Ministers or IMP does not bring them any dividends. But there is one fact, that if you talk about Mukhtar Abbas Naqvi, he's a minister and the BJP will not like to let him go. There are certain openings, say the by-election for Rampur, he is from Rampur, he could be fielded from there. Then remember that if his term ends in July and he can continue as a minister till for the next 6 months, there is going to be another round of Rajya Sabha elections in 2024, and that is where 2023, and that is where perhaps Mr. Naqvi can be accommodated. But that's not the deal breaker for the BJP. What the BJP is trying to send out a signal. You look at the entire Rajya Sabha map for the BJP. You have OBCs and weaker sections, 6 of them in UP. In Bihar, you have 1. In Karnataka, Jagish, who is an actor in Leher Singh, though Yadurappa camp, but OBCs. MP, 1. Madhya Pradesh, 1 Dalit, 1 OBC. Uttarakhand, 1 OBC. Maharashtra, 1 OBC. There is a Dalit in Haryana. In Jharkhand, there is an OBC. The BJP is trying to address the demographic base of the party, which has brought great benefits electorally for the party. And that is why the signaling is for a future, not perhaps to cover up the present.
You know, okay, stay with me. Rasheed Kidwai, I want you to deep dive into the list that has been put out by the Congress, which many and most of them come from within the Congress, who pretty much are saying that, you know, you basically rewarded deadwood over talent.
Preeti, I think there were so many aspirants in the Congress for Rajya Sabha bar that whatever Sonia Gandhi had done, it would have looked bad and would have been subject to criticism because there were very few seats were there. But that is not a difference. In terms of optics, see, Sonia Gandhi has not made any, or for that matter Gandhi, any attempt to, you know, give a democratic look. As they say, you know, aate mein namak milaya jata hai, namak mein aata nahi milaya jata. See, I have covered, and Rajdeep is here, we've covered politics for decades. We have not seen any stunts where a national political party has got so many outsiders in a state and not giving any, you know, recognition to the, so to say, to locals. So this is a very glaring omission at Sonia Gandhi called, you know, the Central Election Committee. If you look at the press release, it is signed by Mukul Vasnik as, you know, in charge of Central Election Committee, but Central Election Committee never met. She did not consult the 2 chief ministers. I mean, in the sense that, you know, in terms of meeting, maybe she spoke to them on phone or whatever, or there was a talk of a Zoom call in which somebody from London was also involved. So all this is in terms of optics, Congress is, you know, losing out a big battle because it is seen as, you know, perpetuating Darbari culture, etc.
But, you know, Mr. Kidwai, optics, where are the optics? The likes of Mr. Pramod Tiwari, the likes of Mr. Vivek Tankha, there are so many and the list keeps going on, even Mukul Vasnik. What do they actually bring to the table? What is it that they do for the Congress? Because this is poor optics, if one has to say.
Preeti, if you see the list of the Congress, the task force has established for 2024, out of the 8 members, 6 of them have added to this list of Rajya Sabha. It means they will not be contesting and they will be fighting, whatever fight, you know, what it is. So you can go on questioning. I'm not saying that. I'm saying whoever had got, you know, a Congress ticket. In the advantage with the BJP is that whatever, because the Modi chief minister loses, but, you know, the BJP wins the state. And they say, you know, Khuda jab husn deta hai, to nazakat aa hi jati hai. So you cannot compare, you know, the present day BJP with present day Congress.
Okay, Rajdeep, I'll bring you in. The likes of Rajiv Shukla, I think this will be his 3rd term where Rajya Sabha is concerned. Pramod Tiwari, what is they actually that they bring to the table when you have, on the other hand, you know, a Pawan Khera who goes out every night in TV studios, takes the party line, fights for it. Shouldn't you have rewarded people like that?
You know, the more things change, the more they remain the same, or bad habits die hard. A lot of these decisions, had they been taken when the Congress was in power and was a dominant party, would have been accepted. The problem with the Congress is that they are acting in the opposition like they would act in power. as they would act in power. You see, when you are in power, you can distribute largesse. You can bring in a Rajiv Shukla as an old family loyalist. You can have a Pramod Tiwari because he's been a long-serving Brahmin face of the Congress in UP. You can bring in an Imran Pratapgarhi as this young Muslim Urdu poet face. All of this can be done when you are in power. When you are in power, you have more Rajya Sabha seats to distribute, and you can distribute the loaves and fishes of office in a way to those who are seen as loyalists. When you are in the opposition, you have to galvanize your cadre, you have to energize them, you have to give them a feeling that we are in the fight. What is the sense you are giving to Maharashtra? The one state which has traditionally been a Congress state, one seat there, you give it to an Imran Pratapgarhi. It effectively suggests to the Maharashtra Congress or the likes of Milind Deora, none of you are good enough. Number two, when you do it in Rajasthan, a state which you desperately need to win next year, the one large North Indian state that you still have to you, and you give all three to so-called outsiders. When you do that in Chhattisgarh, another state where you are in for a fight next year. You see, all of this could have been excused if you are in government. When you are in the opposition, you need to function differently. And I believe the biggest problem the Congress has faced in the last 8 years is they haven't reconciled the fact that they are in the opposition and facing the Modi juggernaut who isn't going anywhere. They seem to believe Mr. Modi is Morarji Desai, who will suddenly one day be defeated by the people and the Congress will return because of anti-incumbency. It's not happening. Who out of these faces excites you? I can understand that you needed in a way a Chidambaram, even though the party had said that you would have one person, one family would only be in one elected post, but Mr. Chidambaram brings the weight of his knowledge as finance minister. Jairam Ramesh is important because he understands parliamentary practices. But if you are going to then fill your ranks only with those who are seen as loyalists, then you have a problem. I can understand a Rajdeep Surjewala who's been working tirelessly as party spokesperson, to some extent Ajay Makan getting it, but there will be questions over some of the others, and you could argue that does the Congress have talent? I would like to believe it does. You spoke about a generational change, that 50% of the seats will be for those below 50. Where is that? I don't think there is maybe Imran Pratapgarhi may be under 50, but the rest certainly are not. And is he really your so-called Muslim? This traditional politics has to change to effect a new kind of politics which can enable you to win elections.
Rahul Shrivastava, I'll bring you in on this because this whole change that the Congress promised during the Chintan Shivir, what happens in terms of representation? What about caste? What about class? What about gender? Because it is everything that the Congress decided that they're going to do. The list smacks everything against what that decision was in Udaipur.
Preeti, that's what I said. This list has not been drawn with elections and politics of the future. It has nothing to do with it. It is largely addressing the internal dynamics of the Congress party. Say, for example, the BJP did well in UP because of the OBC and the Dalit shift in favor of the party, or the larger number of women who have voted for the BJP. So out of the 22, 6 of them are women, 11 of them are OBC and Dalits. So the BJP is sending out a clear signal that if we have had a certain affiliation with certain caste group or demographic groups, we are backing them and we are trying to show that we stay committed to them. The Congress is basically, when Sonia Gandhi had said recently that this party has given many people a lot of things, this is the payback time. This is exactly the crisis, that the Congress is yet again creating a set of leaders who are not leaders of tomorrow. They are leaders of yesterday, so that the present of the Congress High Command can be protected. And that is why one can say that the Congress will achieve nothing but protecting that inner core of the party through this election, while the BJP is preparing leaders for tomorrow, it is addressing demographic constituencies, and the BJP is preparing for elections in the future.
I'm going to just take final comments there, and Rajdeep, I'll begin with you. And the question I want to ask you is the BJP now very clear that they don't even want to hide behind that fig leaf of having maybe one representation where the minority face is concerned? Because the Uttar Pradesh cabinet, ultimately they did get in somebody, for one of the cabinet posts. Are they now completely shorn off it because Muslims don't vote for the party? Why give them representation?
I still believe that the BJP will find a way to accommodate some minority face in the cabinet. I would like to believe that they will do that. I think there is an element you could argue of tokenism, but the BJP will try at least to ensure that. Look, when you talk of social engineering, I think while OBCs and Dalits get primacy today in the BJP's worldview, there will always be some space kept by the party for the minorities. I think the bigger picture is simply this, Preeti, of this, that the BJP looks at everything from political cost benefit, looking at the next election. The Congress is looking at, as Rahul rightly said, how can we keep our inner party dynamics intact? How can we ensure that everyone who is restive is in some way placated or not? And those who are out will perhaps now look for other pastures even within the Congress.
Well, Anand Sharma is one which is being talked about. But Rahul, you know, talking about the BJP's choice here or not picking a Muslim face, at least till now, what happens to that whole Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas? Because somewhere down the line, if you've completely shown off that right now, you're accepting that it is not Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas.
See, Preeti, as when you say a fig leaf, you have an LGP member of parliament who is part of the NDA, who is from the minority community. But I agree with Rajdeep. Mr. Naqvi, it's difficult to edge Mr. Naqvi or a minority member as a trophy case from the government, primarily because of the fact it will look awfully shoddy if you have the Minority Affairs Ministry headed by a majority member. So one thing is very clear, there will be somebody from the minority community holding that portfolio. It has never happened that the minority ministry has gone to somebody from the majority community. But the word also is that Mr. Naqvi is critical for the BJP because he's a talking voice. When an Owaisi attacks the BJP, the counter comes from a Mukhtar Abbas Naqvi. And in that, Naqvi is a much more efficient talker than a Zafar Islam. Both are good friends, but definitely Naqvi has an edge. He has got political experience, and also experience in the Rajya Sabha is a very critical thing. Remember, he is the deputy leader of the party in the upper house. And that is why I will say that don't write off Mukhtar Abbas Naqvi yet. Maybe June 23rd by-poll, and also perhaps in the early part of 2023, he can make an entry back into the Rajya Sabha.
Well, tokenism at that, but as contrived as it may sound, even in Uttar Pradesh, they did bring in a minority face to head the minority affairs portfolio there. But Mr. Kidwai, where the Congress is concerned, sir, all that was discussed in the Chintan Shivir, because if you look at all the pointers that came out from Udaipur, one of them was Dalits, caste, would be gender representation. We haven't seen any of that in this particular list.
Preeti, that's once again I'm saying this is that communication gap I've been talking about and optics. You see, all those measures have been taken. That is for the future. It was not meant for Rajya Sabha elections. And in Rajya Sabha elections, the political party like Congress, they reward. I keep saying task force for 2024. These people need, a house in New Delhi. They need to travel on that kind of, free of expenses, etc. And of course, a recognition of their hard work. You may mock them, you may this thing, but a political party acts on its soldiers. Mr. Sardesai went on naming 5-6 people as, as good, as utility people. Then who are we left with? Imran is also a campaigner. So I don't have much problem with that, because in the present day Congress, whoever you bring, and there will be another set of people who will be criticizing it. And this is very much there. But the Congress' biggest problem is, why not Surjewala from Haryana? Why not Mukul Vasnik from home state of Maharashtra? These are the things that Congress has really messed it, and there is no explanation.
Because Surjewala not from Haryana, Rajdeep, would cause a lot of people, especially like Ms. Kumari Shailja, to feel slighted.
Those can't be reasons. You already have a situation even in Haryana where there is a danger of cross-voting now because an extra candidate has been put. You have a danger in Rajasthan where if a Subhash Goyal contest, Subhash Chandra contest, you will have the danger of cross-voting. It's not that. I come back to it. When the Congress was in power, you could accommodate all your loyalists in the Rajya Sabha, make them ministers. When you're in government, you have to think differently. You have to think politics, elections, winning back the voter. And this list may not be able to achieve that.
All right.